Hello, everyone. Welcome to this quarantine edition of Vermont Humanities First Wednesdays program with poet Richard Blanco. My name is Christopher, and I'm the director of Vermont Humanities. We're really glad that you're with us tonight watching. Personally, I'm a bit crushed that we're not together in person, but I know that we're doing everything we can to keep our neighbors safe. I would like to thank our co-hosts, the Kellogg Hubbard Library in Montpelier, and our sponsors, especially Kevin Ellis and the Vermont Department of Libraries. I'd also like to offer some gratitude to some business sponsors who are supporting us with these digital presentations, especially Northshire Books, Husky Injection Moldings, Crossroads Academy, and Leonine Public Affairs. Richard Blanco is the 5th presidential inaugural poet in U.S. history, the youngest, the first Latino, the first immigrant, and the first gay person to serve in such a role. Born in Madrid to Cuban exile parents and raised in Miami, the negotiation of cultural identity and place characterize his body of work. His latest book of poems, How to Love a Country, both interrogates the American narrative, past and present, and celebrates the still unkept promise of its ideals. Blanco's many honors include the Agnes Lynch Starrett Poetry Prize from the University of Pittsburgh Press, the Penn Beyond Margins Award, the Patterson Poetry Prize, a Lambda Literary Award, and 2 Maine Literary Awards. He lives with his partner in Bethel, Maine, and recorded his presentation this week from Miami, Florida. He will join the watch party on Facebook tonight, so feel free to type your comments or questions as you watch, and Richard will do his best to respond. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to being with you in person as soon as we can.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing great and are healthy and safe. My thanks to the Vermont Humanities Council for always being a champion of my work and of poetry and the humanities in general. And my thanks to all of you for joining in. I've always believed, that poetry is a way of bringing us together, of creating a proverbial village. And here we are, not just proverbial anymore, but also virtual. But I think the effect and the emotions will be the same. So thank you. They say every poet is writing one poem all their life. And of course, figuratively, what that means is that in some ways every poet has some kind of central obsession, something that really possesses their life, and usually early in life, and then becomes the thing that their work is always trying to work out. For me, that obsession comes down to one single word, right? And it's called home. Home and all that big word implies in terms of family, community, heritage, cultural identity, even sexuality. It's an obsession that's been with me practically before I was even born. As I like to say, I was made in Cuba, assembled in Spain, and imported to the United States. My journey has been very complicated for a while. But even besides that, even it goes back to the very first poem I wrote. I walked into my professor's class, and we read some Ginsberg and some Whitman and some, what was that other guy's name? Frost, yeah. And the assignment was write a poem about America. And I went home and I scratched my head and I said, what America are these guys talking about? Because in a sense, I always felt like, well, that's not really the America that I understood. So anyway, this first poem I want to share with you deals with that first assignment and that sense of trying to find a place in the American landscape, in the American narrative. There's only 3 things you really need to know for this poem. One is that for Cubans, pork is not the other white meat, it is the only meat. You also need to know that for Cubans and Latinos in general, we don't really quite still get Thanksgiving. There's a reference to John F. Kennedy, which I think historically you'll understand. And maybe there's even a 4th thing that we need to think about, that really you don't need to be Cuban to have a dysfunctional Thanksgiving, right? So here it is. This is my very first poem in my very first graduate creative writing class. And it's called America. America. Although Tia Miriam boasted she discovered at least half a dozen uses for peanut butter, topping for guava shells and syrup, butter substitute for Cuban toast, hair conditioner, and relaxer, Mama never knew what to make of the monthly 5-pound jars handed by the immigration department until my friend Jeff mentioned jelly. There was always pork, though, for every birthday and wedding, whole ones on Christmas and New Year's Eve, even on Thanksgiving Day. Pork, fried, broiled, or crispy skin roasted, as well as cauldrons of black beans and plantain chips and yuca con mojito. These items required a special visit to Antonio's Mercado on the corner of 8th Street, where men in Guayaberas stood in Senate blaming Kennedy for everything. Ese hijo de puta. The bile of Cuban coffee and cigar residue filling the creases of their wrinkled lips, clinging to one another's lies of lost wealth, ashamed and empty as hollow trees. By 7, I had grown suspicious. We were still here. Overheard conversations about returning to Cuba had grown wistful and less frequent. I spoke English. My parents didn't. We didn't live in a 2-story house with a maid or a wood panel station wagon, nor vacation camping in Colorado. None of the girls in my family had hair of gold. None of my brothers or cousins were named Greg, Peter, or Marcia. We were not the Brady Bunch. And none of the black and white characters on Donna Reed or the Dick Van Dyke Show were named Guadalupe, Lázaro, Mercedes. Patty Duke's family wasn't like us either. They didn't have pork on Thanksgiving. They ate turkey with cranberry sauce. They didn't have yuca. They had yams, like the diddles of pilgrims I colored in class. So, a week before Thanksgiving, I explained to my abuelita about the Indians and the Mayflower, how Lincoln set the slaves free. I explained to my parents about the Purple Mountain's majesty. One if by land, two if by sea, the cherry tree, the tea party, the amber waves of grain, the masses yearning to be free, liberty and justice for all, until finally they agreed this Thanksgiving we would have turkey as well as pork. Abuelita prepared the poor fowl as if committing an act of treason, faking her enthusiasm for my sake. Mama set a frozen pumpkin pie in the oven and prepared candied yams following instructions I translated from the marshmallow bag. The table was arrayed with gladiolas. The plattered turkey loomed at the center on plastic silver from Woolworths. I uttered a bilingual prayer, and the turkey was passed around like a game of Russian roulette. Dry, Gilberto complained, and proceeded to drown the lean slices with pork fat drippings and cranberry jelly. La mierda roja esa, as he called it. Faces fell when Mama presented her ochre pie. Pumpkin, calabaza, was a home remedy for ulcers, not a dessert. Tia Maria made 3 rounds of Cuban coffee, and Abuelo and Pepe cleared the living room furniture, put on a Celia Cruz LP, and the entire family began to merengue over the linoleum of our apartment, sweating rum and coffee, until they remembered it was 1976 and 46 degrees in America. So when I was chosen to be presidential inaugural poet, or PIP as I like to call it, you can imagine that my whole sense of my place in America changed. And so the poem was actually part of my own understanding of my place in America. So I'd like, and of all our places in America, right? So I just want to share this poem with you now. I'm going to preface it with a little thing about what was going on in my mind while I was sitting there waiting to be called up to the podium, and just share the poem with you. In the moment, I feel America standing as one, putting differences aside and taking a deep collective breath. We pay tribute to something far bigger and more important than any one of us, and I truly feel like one of us, one of we, the people, in the echoes of the president's and other speeches. I embrace America in a way I never had or thought I could, feeling for the first time that I belong, truly belong, to one country. Not an imaginary ideal from TV or a nostalgic Cuba floating in the sea of my parents' memories, but a real, tangible place that is mine, was mine all along. Senator Schumer introduces me and calls me up to the podium. My mother squeezes my shoulder. I stand more confident than I imagined I would or could be, transfixed by the moment that is no longer about me or my poem or my glory, but about our country. Still, I'm surprised when the president and vice president stand up to greet me and shake my hand on the way to the podium. They both whisper something in my ear that I can't make out, but their gracious gestures speak silently to my heart, silently, as if saying, Richard, here is your country. This is your story. You are home. I step up to the podium, look out over the crowd, a patchwork quilt of lives, of stories spread across our ground under our sky, beneath our one sun. I take it all in as I take one deep breath and then another. This is for them. This is for us. This is for all of us, I think to myself, and begin speaking into our wind. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, America, one today. One sun rose on us today, kindled over our shores, peeking over the Smokies, greeting the faces of the Great Lakes, spreading a simple truth over the Great Plains, then charging over the Rockies. One light waking up rooftops, under each one a story told by our silent gestures moving behind our windows. My face, your face, millions of faces in morning's mirrors, each one yawning to life, crescendoing into our day. Pencil yellow school buses, the rhythm of traffic lights, fruit stands, apples, limes, and oranges, arrayed like rainbows, begging our praise. Silver trucks heavy with oil or paper, bricks or milk, teeming our highways alongside us on our way to clean tables, read ledgers, or save lives. To teach geometry or ring up groceries as my mother did for 20 years so I could write this poem for us today. All of us. As vital as the one light that moves through. The same light on blackboards with lessons for the day. Equations to solve, history to question, or atoms imagined, the I have a dream, we keep dreaming, or the impossible vocabulary of sorrow that won't explain, the empty deaths of 20 children marked absent today and forever. Many prayers, but one light, breathing color into stained glass windows, life into the faces of bronze statues, warmth onto the steps of our museums and park benches as mothers watch their children slide into the day. One ground, our ground, rooting us to every stalk of corn, every head of wheat sown by sweat and hands, hands gleaning coal or planting windmills in deserts and hilltops that keep us warm, hands digging trenches, hands routing pipes and cables, hands as worn as my father's, cutting sugarcane so my brother and I could have books and shoes. The dusts of our farms and deserts, our cities and plains mingled by one wind, our breath. Breathe. Hear it. through the day's gorgeous din of honking cabs, buses launching down avenues, the symphony of footsteps, guitars, and screeching subways, the unexpected songbird on your clothesline. Hear squeaky playground swings, trains whistling, whispers across cafe tables. Hear the doors we open for each other each day, saying, hello, shalom, buongiorno, howdy, namaste, or buenos dias, in the language my mother taught me, in every language, spoken into one wind, carrying our lives without prejudice, as these words break from my lips. One sky. Since the Appalachians and Sierras claimed their majesty, and the Mississippi and Colorado worked their way to the sea, thank the work of our hands, weaving steel into bridges, finishing one more report for the boss in time, stitching under the wound or uniform, the first brushstroke on a portrait, or the last floor of the Freedom Tower jutting into a sky yielding to our resilience, one sky toward which we sometimes lift our eyes, tired from work. Some days guessing at the weather of our lives. Some days giving thanks for a love that loves you back. Sometimes praising a mother who knew how to give, or forgiving a father who couldn't give what you wanted. Still, we head home. Through the gloss of rain, a weight of snow, or the plum blush of dusk, but always, always home. Always under one sky, our sky, and always one moon, like a silent drum tapping on every rooftop and every window of one country. All of us facing the stars and hope, a new constellation, still waiting for us to map it, still waiting for us to name it together. So my experience as presidential inaugural obviously changed a lot of things in my life, and it changed what I think and want to write about and how I write about things. And this is the new book that came out, which was How to Love a Country. And this next poem is actually part of the collection, but it was actually part of one of the 3 poems that the president asked me to write. And it deals with my mother and her journey, and thinking about how we can look at our country through sort of immigrant eyes, my own immigrant eyes, but especially my mother's. To love a country as if you've lost one. 1968. My mother leaves Cuba for America, a scene I imagine as if standing in her place. One foot inside a plane destined for a country she knew only as a name, a color on a map, or glossy photos in a drugstore magazine. Her other foot anchored to the platform of her patria, her hand clutched around one suitcase, taking only what she needs most. Hand-colored photographs of her family, her wedding veil, the doorknob of her house, a jar of dirt from her backyard, goodbye letters she won't open for years. The sorrowful drone of engines, one last deep breath of familiar air she'll take with her, one last glint at all she'd ever known. The palm trees wave goodbye as she steps onto the plain. The mountains shrink from her eyes as she lifts off into another life. To love a country as if you've lost one. I hear her, once upon a time, reading picture books over my shoulder at bedtime, both of us learning English, sounding out words as strange as the talking animals and fair-haired princes in their pages. I touched her first attempts at macaroni and cheese, but with chorizo and peppers. And her shame over Thanksgiving turkeys, always dry, but countered by her perfect pork beneath and garlic yuca. I smell the rain of those mornings, huddled as one under one umbrella, waiting for the bus to her 10-hour days at the cash register. And at night, the zzz of her sewing her own blouses and quinceañera dresses for her grown nieces still in Cuba, guessing at their sizes. And the gowns she'd sell to neighbors to save for a rusty white sedan, no hubcaps, no air conditioning, sweating all the way through our first vacation to Florida theme parks to love a country. As if we've lost one. As if it were you on a plane departing from America forever, clouds closing like curtains on your country, the last scene in which we're a madman scribbling the names of your favorite flowers, trees, and birds you'd never see again. Your address and phone number you'd never use again. The color of your father's eyes and your mother's hair, terrified you could somehow, someday, forget these. To love a country. As if I was my mother last spring, hobbling, insisting I help her climb all the way up to the U.S. Capitol, as if she were here before you today instead of me, explaining her tears, her cheeks pink as the cherry blossoms coloring the air that day when she stopped, turned to me, and said, "You know, mijo, it doesn't matter where you're born. It's where you choose to die. That's your country." So this is a poem for and about my father, which is just basically thinking about the sacrifices that he made as an immigrant, as an exile, and really, ultimately, really, it's also a poem about thanks, just thanking him. My father, in English. First half of his life lived in Spanish, the long syntax of Las Montañas that lined his village. The rhythm of soul with his soul. A Cuban alma that swayed with Las Palmas. The sharp rhythm of his machete cutting through caña. The syllables of his canarios that sung into la brisa of the island home. He left to spell out the second half of his life in English. The vernacular of New York City, sleet, neon, glass, and the brick factory where he learned to polish steel 12 hours a day. Enough to save enough to buy a used Spanish-English dictionary he kept bedside like a Bible. Studied 15 new words after his prayers each night, then practiced them on us the next day. Buenos dias, indeed, my family. Indeed, mas café. Have a good day today, indeed. And again in the evening. Gracias to my bella wife, indeed, for dinner. Hiciste tu homework, indeed. La vida es indeed difícil. Indeed, did indeed become his favorite word, which, like the rest of his new life, he never quite grasped. Overused and misused, often to my embarrassment. Yet the word I most learned to love and know him through. Indeed, the exile who tried to master the language, he chose to master him. Indeed, the husband who refused to say, I love you in English to my mother. The man who died without true translation. Indeed, meaning in fact, en efecto, meaning in reality, de hecho, meaning to say now what I've always meant to tell him in both languages. Thank you. Gracias. For surrendering the past tense of your life so that I might conjugate myself here in the present of this country. Así es. Indeed. This poem is based on a photograph by Jacob Hessler out of a collaborative project that we did. And it's a picture of the Rio Grande. And obviously it speaks to the border, the US-Mexico border, where the river is actually part of the border. And it's just started thinking about the complexities of that, both as myself as a Latino, and just thinking about, that there's much more to it than we usually understand or the news lets us understand. So the way I chose to think about it was to just write in the voice of the river. It's a persona poem that sort of speaks to humanity in general, and lets us think and rethink about what our connections are and what our countries at the end of the day. Complaint of El Rio Grande. I was meant for all things to meet, to make the clouds pause in the mirror of my waters, to be home to fallen rain that finds its way to me, to turn eons of loveless rock into love-sick pebbles and carry them as humble gifts back to the sea that brings life back to me. I felt the sun flare, praised each star flocked about the moon long before you did. I breathed air you'll never breathe. Listen to songbirds before you could speak their names, before you dug your oars in me, before you created the gods that created you. Then countries, your invention. Maps jigsawing the world into colored shapes, caves and bold lines to say you're here, not there, you're this, not that, to say yellow isn't red, red isn't black, black is not white, to say mine, not ours, to say war, and believe that life's worth is relative. You named me. Big river drew me. Blue, thick, to divide, to say spick and Yankee, to say wetback and gringo. You split me in two, half of me us, the rest other, but I wasn't meant to drown children. Hear mother's cries. Never meant to be your geography, a line, a border, a murderer. I was meant for all things to meet. The mirrored clouds and suns tingle, bird songs in the quiet moon, the wind and its dust, the rush of mountain rain, and us. Blood that runs in you is water flowing in me. Both life, the truth we know, is to be one in one another. This poem was commissioned by Freedom to Marry, which was a really important organization that helped sort of create the tipping point for marriage equality in America. And it's loosely based on my relationship with my own husband, or who was not my husband back then. But really, it's really about love, because love is love. Until we could, for Mark, my husband. I knew it then. When we first found our eyes and everything around us, even the din and smoke of the city disappeared, leaving us alone as if we were the only two people in the world, two mirrors, face to face, my reflection in yours, yours in mine, infinite. I knew, since I knew you, but we couldn't. I cut the sunlight, pining through the shears, traveling millions of dark miles simply to graze your skin. As I did that first dawn, I studied you, sleeping beside me. Yes, I counted your eyelashes, read your dreams like butterflies flitting under your eyelids and ready to flutter into the room. Yes, I praised you like a majestic creature my God forgot to create. To that morning of you tamed in my arms, first for me to say and name you mine. Yes, to the rise and fall of your body, every breath, exhale and inhale, I breathed as my own, wanting to keep even the air between us as one. Yes to all of you. Yes, I knew, but still we couldn't. I taught you how to dance salsa by looking into my Caribbean eyes. You learned to speak in my tongue while teaching me how to catch snowflakes in your palm and love the gray clouds of your worn-out hometown. Our eyes began collecting the glossy photos, timelining our lives across shelves and walls, glancing back at us embracing in some sunset, more captivated by each other than the sky brushed plum rose. Us claiming some mountain that didn't matter as much as our claiming it together. Us leaning against columns of ruins as ancient as our love was new. Or leaning into our dreams at a table, flickering candlelight into our full-mooned eyes. I knew me as much as I knew us. And yet we couldn't. Though I forgave your blue eyes, turning green each time you lied, kept believing you, though we managed to say good morning after muted nights in the same bed, though every door slam told me to hold on by letting us go, and saying you're right became as true as saying I'm right. Till there was nothing a long walk couldn't solve. Holding hands and hope under the street lights, lustering like a string of pearls guiding us home, or a stroll along the beach with our dog, the sea washed out by our smiles, our laughter roaring louder than waves. Though we understood our love was the same as our parents, though we dared to tell them so, and they understood, though we knew we couldn't. No one could. When fiery kick lines and fires were set for us by our founding mother-fathers at Stonewall, when we first spoke of defiance, when we paraded glitter, leather, and rainbows down every street, and pride became our word, demanding, just let us be. But that wasn't enough. Parades became rallies, bold words on signs, shouting until we all claimed freedom as another word for marriage and said, "Let us in," insisted, "Love is love," proclaimed it into all eyes that would listen, at any door that would open, until no's and maybes turned into yeses, town by town, city by city, state by state, understanding us and all those who dared to say enough, until the gravel struck into law what we always knew. Love is the right to say, "I do," and "I do." And I do want us to see every tulip planted come up spring after spring. 100 more years of dinners cooked over shared glasses of wine, and 1,000 more movies in bed. I do until our eyes become voices speaking without speaking. I do until, like a cloud meshed into a cloud, there's no more me, you, our names useless. I want you to be the last face I see. Your breath, my last. I do. I do. And will. And will for all those who still can't vow it yet, but know love's exact reason as much as they know how a sail keeps the wind without breaking, how roots dig away into the earth, how the stars open their eyes into the night, or how a vine becomes one with the wall it loves, or how when I hold you, you are still rain in my hands. This poem is based on a photograph by Jacob Hessler, and it was part of a collaborative project that we did. And the photograph is a present-day photo of the last recorded or known lynching in the United States, the date of which will surprise you, and it's part of the poem. But I think what I wanted the poem to do was to speak to the larger issues, or really just the issues today that we're still thinking about, of race in America, race, and really that we haven't, something we've faced and not faced, something that's really unresolved. And the poem really is about the unresolution about race. If you look at this photo, you'll see that it looks like any street in America, and yet if you would drive by it, you would never know what happened there. And it's sort of drawing a parallel on that sort of negative space of how easily we can sweep, or have kept on sweeping, the issue of race in America under the rug. Easy lynching on Herndon Avenue. What I'd rather not see isn't here. No rope. No black body under a white moon swaying limp from a tree. No bloody drops of dew on the 21st of March, 1981. That's in another photo, like a dozen other photos I've gaped at, wanting, not wanting, to turn away from the snap necks of the hanged. And the mob's smug smirks, asking myself, how could they? Why? Questions not here, not in this photo. A crisp and tranquil snapshot, murder washed up by time, history left uncaptured. What's left now is easier on our eyes. Only pale morning lights seeping blue into the sky, a backdrop to the necks of the tree boughs bowing like swans, innocent of any crime on Herndon Avenue, pictured like any street. Clean sidewalks, no blood. Utility poles strung with wires, no rope. A few pavement cracks, no broken boned body. Easier to imagine only this: groomed children waiting for the school bus, grinding to a halt that March morning, the 21st, 1981. Their backpacks sipped with undoubtable history and equations, cartoon lunchboxes filled with fresh ham sandwiches and sweet grapes. Sport coat fathers dashing to work, worried about paychecks and the greenness of their lawns. All-day mothers left tending, soaked pillows never fluffed enough, scrubbing sinks never white enough, wiping windows never spotless enough. Easier not to ask if anyone saw him, if anyone knew the boy whose mama named Michael. Michael Donald. Easier to think no one was friendly with Mr. Hayes and Mr. Tiger Knowles, who, on the night of March 21st, 1981, drove around looking for something black to kill. They spotted him, age 19, walking home. The body. Strangled him first, then slit his throat. The blood. Chose a tree to hang him. The rope. Herndon Avenue, 1981. Why? Which tree was it that shook with the last breath? Easier not to look for it, not to find it, not make ourselves imagine Michael still hanging on Herndon Avenue, his death still alive since March 21st, 1981. Easier not to look at his shut eyes, wonder what his favorite color or superhero was, if he liked to skateboard or draw, if he heard his mama's cries. My boy, Jesus, my boy. Easier to believe the last words on the lips of his murderers must have been, "Forgive us." To trust this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. Stay blind, no rope, no blood, no body, to the life of a boy named Michael. Invisible in this photo, that is, until we look long and deep and hard enough. This poem is from the book How to Love a Country, which I've often thought is also sort of has a question mark behind it. But it deals with patriotism. What does it mean to love a country, right? And in this particular poem, I go back to that kind of innocent patriotism, that sort of pure patriotism, before we knew what Democrat or Republican were or anything like that. But just that pure sense of really just loving beautiful words of freedom and of liberty and justice that I think many of us grew up with. And so for me, that's embodied in the song of America the Beautiful. So I may sing a little bit here, but I hope you forgive me. America the Beautiful, again. How I sang, "Oh Beautiful," like a psalm at church, with my mother, her Cuban accent scaling up every vowel. Oh, beautiful, yet in perfect pitch, delicate and tuned to the radiant beams of stained glass light. How she taught me to fix my eyes on the crucifix as we sang our thanks to our Savior for this country that saved us. Our voices, hymns as passionate as the organ, piping towards the very heavens. How I sang, "For spacious skies," closer to those skies, while perched on my father's sunbeat shoulders, towering above our first 4th of July parade. How the timbre through our bodies mingled, breathing, singing as one with the brass notes of the marching band playing the only song he ever learned. in English. How I dared to sing it at assembly with my teenage voice cracking. For amber waves of grain that I'd never seen, nor the purple mountain majesties, but could imagine them in each verse rising from my very gut. Every exclamation of praise, I belted out until my throat hurt. America, and again, America. How I began to read Nietzsche and doubt God, yet still wished for God to shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood. How I still want to sing, despite all the truth of our wars and our gunshots ringing louder than our school bells, our politicians smiling lies at the mic, the deadlock of our divided voices shouting over each other instead of singing together. How I want to sing again. Beautiful or not, just to be harmony. From sea to shining sea, with the only country I know enough about to sing for.